This video is sponsored by Britannica because that's where I got a majority of this information. More about that later in the video. Welcome to Disruptive Philosophy with myself, Brittany. In this video, I'm going to be giving some behind-the-scenes information on who Carl Jung was and what his value system was, and dispelling a few misconceptions like he was a Nazi. I feel like this is really important because a huge portion of this philosophy is based on Carl Jung psychology. That and Platonism. So understanding the philosopher is important, and it also will quiet the people in the comments who want to be like, you can't be listening to this old white man who died in 1955 who might have been a Nazi. You're a black woman in America. I don't want to deal with people who just want to argue about that. So I just thought I'd preemptively put this video out here. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychologist and psychoanalyst, theoretician, artist, writer, and social critic who dedicated his life to the fullest exploration of the human psyche. Some of the foundational concepts that Jung founded, discovered, developed, proposed are things like introversion and extroversion, archetypes, and their connection to the psyche and complexes, as well as the collective unconscious. His work has been incredibly influential in psychiatry and in the study of religion, literature, and related fields. Carl Jung is basically let's say, if Freud is the grandmother of psychology, Jung is the grandfather. I think Freud would be the femme archetype in there. Yeah, I think so. The foundation of a lot of the psychology we use today, even the concept of psychoanalysis, going to therapy, sitting on a therapist's couch, that comes from these two gentlemen. So, as much as Freud may have been obsessed with his mother, Freud also brought us a lot of very good ideas. Jung saw some of the flaws in his ideas and then broke away from Freud and expanded on those things. We'll get more into that later. Jung was born in Keswil, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, Keswil, Switzerland, on July 26, 1875. Jung was the son of a philologist and a pastor. His childhood was very lonely, although he enriched it with his very active imagination, and from an early age he observed behaviors of his parents and teachers, which he spent his whole life trying to resolve, trying to figure out. Jung was raised in a very religious household where he was expected to join the clergy. And even though his father was a pastor, Jung felt comfortable communicating to his father about Jung's issues with the religious practices. And Jung wanted to share with his father his own unique experiences of what God may be. Jung's father was said to be a kind and tolerant man, but Jung and his father would never see eye to eye or truly succeed in understanding each other. Jung's mother suffered from mental illness and was temporarily committed to a mental institution when Jung was 3. This experience and his mother's mental health issues likely is a motivation for why he committed his life to this work. As Jung became a teenager, he discovered philosophy and just read every book that he could possibly read. And together with that information and his disappointment with his boyhood, he forsaked the family tradition and did not become part of the clergy, and instead became a psychiatrist. He was a student at the University of Basel from 1895 to 1900, and at Zurich for his MD in 1902. He joined the staff of an asylum in the University of Zurich in 1900. While attending the University of Zurich, he became under the guidance of Eugene Buehler. Bueller, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, a pioneering psychologist who laid the groundwork for what is now considered the classical studies of mental illness. Jung observed different triggers that would elicit emotional responses from patients, which he believed represented a subconscious association around toxic behavior. These observations led the way for Jung to label these complexes and associated complexes with unresolved trauma and unconscious aspects of the psyche. For 5 years between 1907 and 1912, Jung worked with Freud. Jung's research at the University of Zurich put him on an international level, and during his time with Freud, he confirmed many of Freud's ideas and concepts. He married in 1903 and had 5 children. In 1912, Freud and Jung had a very serious disagreement. The publication of Jung's book, The Psychology of the Unconscious, ran counter to many of Freud's ideas, and partly for temperamental reasons of working with Freud, and partly because of Freud's obsession with sexual neurosis, the two split. Between 1911 and 1914, Jung was president of the International Psychoanalytical Society. In later years, Jung became a professor of psychology at the Federal Polytechnical University in Zurich from 1993 to 1941. Jung died June 6, 1961. Now let's go into some of Jung's politics. And because politics are a good representation of your value system as a person, I think these are important. As early as 1918, Jung began sensing, intuiting, getting information from his patients from Germany that Germany was going to play a big part in Europe. The Nazi Revolution was therefore highly significant to him, and he delivered a number of highly contested views that had him wrongly labeled as a Nazi sympathizer. In a 1936 essay titled Wotan, Jung described the influences of Hitler on Germany as the following. One man who is obviously possessed has infected a whole nation to such an extent that everything is set in motion and has started rolling on its course towards perdition. He would later say in a lengthy interview in October 1938 the following. Hitler seemed like the double of a real person, as if Hitler the man might be hiding inside like an appendix, and deliberately so concealed in order not to disturb the mechanism. You know, you could never talk to this man because there is nobody there. It is not an individual. It is an entire nation. Jung consistently rejected accusations of anti-Semitism. And in that last statement, Jung was more talking about Hitler's cognitive functions and the uniqueness of the neurosis Hitler was suffering from. That last statement wasn't praise or admiration of Hitler. It was more shock and awe at the level of neurosis. It was more of an objective observation as a psychologist. In a 1948 interview, Carl Jung stated, "It must be clear to anyone who has read any of my books that I have never been a Nazi sympathizer, and I have never been anti-Semitic, and no amount of misquotation, mistranslation, or rearrangement of what I have written can alter the record of my true point of view. Nearly every one of these passages has been tampered with, either by malice or by ignorance. Furthermore, my friendly relations with a large group of Jewish colleagues and patients over a period of many years in itself disproves the charge of anti-Semitism." Hopefully that issue's resolved now. I don't know what else the man needs to say. Not a Nazi. Now let's talk about how Jung was kind of a revolutionary. Jung always stressed the importance of individual rights in a person's relation to the state and society. He saw the state was treated as a quasi-animated personality from whom everything is expected, but that this personality was only camouflage for those individuals who know how to manipulate it, and referred to the state as a form of slavery. My comrade. He also thought that the state swallowed people's religious forces and that therefore the state had taken the place of God. making it compared to a religion in which state slavery is a form of worship. This motherfucker said, the state is a cult. And it is. He was right. It still is. Jung observed that stage acts of the state are comparable to religious displays. Brass bands, flags, banners, parades, and monster demonstrations are no different in principle from ecclesiastical processions, cannonades, and fire to scare off demons. All right, this is a perfect transition. Since Jung thought the state was a cult, let's now see what he thinks about religion. From Jung's perspective, the replacement of God with the state in a mass society leads to the dislocation of the religious drive and results in the same fanaticism of the church and state of the Dark Ages. Damn! Wherein more the state is worshipped, the more freedom and morality is suppressed. This ultimately leaves the individual psyche undeveloped, with extreme feelings of marginalization. Let's talk about Jung's view on psychedelics. Jung's views on psychedelics are based on his correspondence with researchers involved in psychedelic research in the 50s. These are also connected to recent neuroimaging research where subjects had been administered psychedelic compounds. And when they go through their experience, they seem to have archetypal religious experiences that create unity and also ego dissolution. Commenting on research that was done on psychedelics in the 1950s, Jung wrote the following letter to Betty Eisner, a psychologist who was involved in LSD research at the University of California. Jung said, "Experiments along the line of mescaline and related drugs are certainly most interesting, since such drugs lay bare a level of the unconscious that is otherwise accessible only under peculiar psychic conditions. It is a fact that you get certain perceptions and experiences of things appearing either in mystical states or in the analysis of unconscious phenomena. Did I mention this was disruptive philosophy? So we won't be serious all the time here, okay? I don't have letters behind my name, so I don't have to look like I'm some professor. Also, one reason why a lot of you don't want to learn this stuff is because the way it's presented is oftentimes boring and pretentious and inaccessible. And that is the point of my channel, to break down those barriers. That is my video on some history on Jung, okay? He was a leftist who believed that the state was a cult and that we'd replace God with the state, and that belief system has us in religious views from the Dark Ages. He also believed in psychedelics and saw their potential to help us connect with an aspect of our unconscious that can help heal us. Hopefully you enjoyed this. The next video in this series, we are going to be talking about what is depth psychology and human mythology. Please ask me all the questions and comments down below. Please subscribe and hit the bell. You know all the things to do on YouTube, okay? And go check out Disruptive Bodies Live if you want to catch some of my live streams and clips from my live streams where I talk a little bit in a less organized manner. And also you get to ask questions automatically and connect with me in the chat. Again, you guys know how the internet works. I shouldn't have to do this in all my videos, okay? YouTube's been a thing for too long. You know the thing. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to this part of the video, my name is Brittany, and this has been Disruptive Philosophy. I'll see you in the next one. In the next one. We'll do it again in the next one. Do it again in the next one. Do it again in the next one. Do it again in the next one.